Giri Govardhan Yamuna Jaya 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 Krishna Jaya Vrindavan. Okay, we are on Facebook. Okay, we're almost ready to go. One more step. Okay. And here we go. Whoops, wrong camera. There we go. Right camera. Alrighty. Okay, we will start by chanting Jai Radha Madhava. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Gopi Jana Malabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Gopi Jana Malabha Kiri Bharadhauti Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhauti Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvatikacharya Ostutara Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Chalanad Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Hridas Thakur Ki Jai Ren Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Shyam Kund Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Ki Jai Maturam Ki Jai Jagadata Swami Ki Jai Yuvanamai Ki Jai Shrimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauranga Pachani Nivishesha Sringavadi Paschatya Deja Tarani. So, Om Gana Timiranda Shagananjana Shalakaya Jaksuran Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Guru Maha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my divine spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Okay. So, now we're continuing with our study of the Bhagavad Gita. We're on the 18th chapter, and we're on text 37. The 18th chapter, we're getting close to the end. And then we get to the nectar of devotion after that. Okay, so let us start without further ado. Sharing the screen. Here we go. 3, 1, 2. Text 37. Yadtaragre vishamiva pariname mritopanam tatsukam satvikam proktam atmabudi prasadajam. Yat which, because we're talking about happiness right now, taught that agre in the beginning, vishamiva, like poison, pariname at the end. In other words, it becomes transformed. That's what parinama means. Amrita, nectar. Upamam, compared to, taught that. Sukham, happiness. Satvikam, in the mode of goodness. Proktam is said. Atma, in the self. Buddhi, of intelligence. Prasadajam, born of satisfaction. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. Purport, in the pursuit of self-realization, one has to follow many rules and regulations to control the mind and the senses and to concentrate the mind on the self. All these procedures are very difficult, bitter like poison. But if one is successful in following the regulations and comes to the transcendental position, he begins to drink real nectar and he enjoys life. So let me comment on this. Because these aspects that are like poison for those in the lower modes, not for those in the mode of goodness. So, for example, when you come to Krishna consciousness, you have to give up certain things. And of course, we have our 4 regular principles, which you know: no intoxication, no gambling, no meat eating, and no illicit sex. You have to give those up. So that's one type of, for some people, it's poison. Actually, for me, I was already doing that. But in any case, and other things, some things for me were difficult, like getting up early in the morning. Now, when you tell people in the Western world that you get up at 3 in the morning, they think, oh my God, that's torture, poison. And you only eat food that's cooked by Krishna. And you don't eat at restaurants. What's that? They think there's a poison. They give up all these. They think that that's real nectar. All these things that we do in this materialistic society. So, but when you give them up, it's a struggle in the beginning. Yeah, getting up early is a struggle in the beginning. Because I was accustomed to getting up at like 11 o'clock in the morning, going to sleep at 3 in the morning. So I had to reverse my whole life to do that. And of course, chanting 16 rounds a day and some other regulation like that. Following the spiritual master's directions. Actually, I didn't find that so difficult because I love Prabhupada. So that was not a problem. But let's say, brahmachari life was kind of austere, we have to live in a room with 30 other men and share clothes with everybody. A little austere. Not too bad. Anyway, it's always been like nectar for me. Sorry about that one. But for one of the lower modes of nature, it is like a real struggle. Getting up early, Mongol arti or chanting the 16 rounds. What a struggle. But then at the end, it becomes wonderful. You enjoy it so much. So text 38, now we're going to talk about happiness in the mode of passion. Vishyendriya samyogat yattadagre mritopanam pariname vishamiva tatsukam rajasam smritam. Vishya, of the objects of the senses, indriya, and the senses. Samyogat, from the combination yat, which, taught that. Agre, in the beginning. Amrita upamam. Amrita means nectar. Upamam means like the highest nectar. Pariname, at the end. And the word pariname, as I mentioned before, means it becomes transformed. This is interesting. Prabhupada translates it at the end. Visham, Iva, like poison. Taught that. Sukham, happiness. Rajasam, in the mode of passions, Pratam, is considered that happiness which is derived from the contact of the senses with their objects and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion. And the purport, get ready. A young man and a young woman meet, and the senses drive the young man to see her, to touch her, and to have sexual intercourse. In the beginning, this may be very pleasing to the senses, but at the end, after some time, it becomes just like poison. They are separated, or there is divorce. There is lamentation. There is sorrow. So, in other words, if they get married as a duty to Krishna, there's nothing wrong with that. They can like each other too, obviously. But if the impetus for getting married is just like the iron filing, being attracted to a magnet, or butter becoming ghee under heat. Just like Prabhupada said, sometimes it can be described that a woman is like fire and a man is like butter. And when the butter melts, after a while it becomes ghee, so one becomes a ghee-hasta. Such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. And now we'll go to ignorance. Yad agre janavande cha sukham mohanam atmana nidra lasya pramodatam tattamasam udaratam. Yat, that which, agre, in the beginning, cha, also, anubhande, at the end, cha, also, sukham, happiness, mohanam, illusory, atmanaha, of the self, nidra, sleep, alasya, laziness, pramada, and illusion, utam, produced of tat, that, tamasam, in the mode of ignorance, udaratam. So notice the word pariname is not used in this particular verse. In other words, there's no transformation in the mode of ignorance. It's always the same. And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, just let me eat and sleep and what? Made and defend. Whew. Like a gorilla, basically. Like that Tarzan movie. Me Tarzan, you Jane. And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from the beginning to the end, just based on the body, which arises from sleep, laziness, illusion. Attachment to the body is said to be the nature of ignorance. One who takes pleasure in laziness and sleep is certainly in the mode of darkness, ignorance, and one who has no idea how to act and how not to act is also in the mode of ignorance. For a person in the mode of ignorance, everything is illusion. There's no happiness either in the beginning or at the end. For the person in the mode of passion, there might be some kind of ephemeral happiness. Ephemeral means it just comes and disappears. And in the end, in the beginning, and at the end, distress. But for the person in the mode of ignorance, there's only distress both in the beginning and at the end. So remember, happiness for people in the three modes of nature. And of course, What that means is that we can be fluctuating between the different modes. Sometimes we can be hankering for happiness in the mode of goodness. Sometimes we can be hankering for mode of happiness in the mode of passion. Sometimes we can be hankering for happiness in the mode of ignorance. So it's not just like one person in one mode. One person can be in all three modes at different times, or in a combination of the modes. So it gets a little more complicated than it first seems. Next text. Natadasti pratibhyam va divi deveshu va punaha sattvam prakati jarmuktam yadibhi shatrivir gunahai nanat tat that. Asti, there is pratibhyam on the earth, va or divi in the higher planetary system, deveshu amongst the demigods, va or punaha, again, sattvam existence, prakriti jahai, born of material nature, muktam, liberated, yat that, ebihi, from the influence of these, shat is, tribihi, three, gunahai, modes of material nature. There's no being existing either here among the demigods and the higher planetary systems, which is freed from these three modes born of material nature, unless they're pure devotees. The Lord here summarizes the influence of the three modes of material nature all over the universe. That's all there is. That's all, folks. So, next verse. And now we're going to get to a little bit about Varnashram culture, which we're talking about Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, and their nature, and their qualities. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Visham, Shudralam, Cha, Parantapa, Karmani, Prabhibhaktani, Svabhava, Prabhavaya, Gunahai, Brahmana of the Brahmanas, Kshatriya, the Kshatriyas, Visham and the Vaishyas, Shudranam of the Shudras, Cha and Parantapa, O subduer of the enemies. Karmani, the activities. Prabhibhaktani are divided, Swabhava, their own nature, Prabhavahai, born of Gunahai by the modes of material nature. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras are distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the material modes. O chastiser of the enemies. In other words, whether one is a Brahmin, a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, or somewhere in between, is not due to their birth, their family name. It is due to the qualities that they exhibit. And someone can change those qualities by association. For example, a Jamil, he was a Brahmin, and yet he associated in the wrong way with the prostitute, and he became, for all intents and purposes, a Shudra at that point. It's not that he remained a Brahmin, he became a Shudra. So a Brahmin can become a Shudra, a Brahmin can become a Kshatriya, a Brahmin can become a Vaishya, whatever. Or a Shudra can become a Brahmin. How is that? Ho bata swapacho gariyan yajivagre vartate namatubhyam. Tapustapuschuhu Sharshna Aryar Ramanuchur Nama Granantiyate. How wonderful it is if one is chanting the Lord's holy names, that it's understood that even if he's born in the family of dog eaters, that he's come to the standpoint of being a Brahmin. So anyway, so now we'll find out about the qualities by which you can see who you are. You don't even need to go to an astrologer. It's a very easy thing to see what your qualities are and who you are according to the Varnashram system. Very easy system of diagnosis. Shamodamat dapa shocham shantirajvamevacha jnanam vijnanamastikam brahma karma svabhavacham. Shamaha, peacefulness. Damaha, self-control. Tapaha, austerity. Shocham, purity. Shanti, tolerance. Arjavam, honesty. Eva, certainly. Cha, and jnanam, knowledge. Vijnanam, wisdom. Astikyam, religiousness. Brahma, of a Brahmana, karma, duty. Swabhavajam, born of his own nature. So peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are all the natural qualities by which the Brahmins work. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Peacefulness, controlling the senses, not giving in to the urges of the senses, accepting austerity, not accepting things that are counterproductive to Krishna consciousness, accepting things that are productive. Purity, there's ritual purity, of course, there's bathing regularly, always remembering Krishna. Yaksmaret Pundarigaksham, remembering the lotus-eyed Lord. Tolerating happiness, distress, peace, and being enthusiastic, being straightforward. Actually, the word in Sanskrit means straightforward, which is the same as honesty. Not being a liar, being dependable, and cultivating spiritual knowledge and practicing that spiritual knowledge. Knowledge, wisdom means to practice that spiritual knowledge, and religiousness means basically religion to connect yourself, yoga, with God, with Krishna. So these are Brahmins. Brahman is known by his quality. In fact, the literal meaning of the word Brahmana is one who knows Brahman. In other words, one who knows spirit, or the difference between spirit and matter. So you have to see, are you by nature a peaceful person, self-controlled person, accepting and judging things on whether it's good or bad for self-realization? Are you clean? Do you tolerate happiness and distress and insult if someone insults you? Do you simply say, thank you, Hare Krishna? Do you tell the truth? Or are you devious? Do you regularly study Vedic literatures, try to understand the self? Do you apply that knowledge? And are you dedicated to Krishna? And if you have these qualities, then we can understand your Brahman. Of course, nowadays everyone's pretty mixed. Sometimes you're going to be exhibiting qualities of the Brahmin, sometimes the Kshatriya, and then all the other castes. Okay, so next text is the Kshatriya. The word Kshatriya means one who frees others from harm. Just like we have mantra, which means to free the mind, mana tra, trayate. So shat means harm, triya, trayate, means to free one. So a Kshatriya is very heroic. Anyway, let's read the qualities. Shoyam tejo dratir laksham yude chap yapalayanam dhanam ishwara bhavascha shatram karma svabhavajam. Shoyam, heroism, teja, power, dritahi, determination, daksham, resourcefulness. It also means being expert. Yudhe, in battle, means fighting. Cha, and api also. Apalayanam, not fleeing. If there's a battle, he just stays there. Dhanam, generosity. Ishvara, of leadership. Bhava, the nature. Cha, and Shatram, of a Kshatriya. Karma, duty. So Bhavajam, born of his own nature. Heroism. Heroism means the ability to face danger, to face death, and keep on doing what you're doing. A Brahmana is not like that. A Brahmana is not heroic in the same sense. A Brahmana will not like to fight. A Brahmana will run away from a fight. A Brahmana, if he's hurt, he'll take some remedial measure. A Kshatriya will just go on fighting in spite of arrows in his body. Like Grandfather Bhishma was filled with arrows when he was fighting against Krishna and Arjuna, and he kept rushing at them. Or if there's a bullet to be taken out, he won't need anesthesia. That's a Kshatriya. He'll bite the bullet. That expression is there because in the old wars, there were bullets in people's bodies, and they had to bite a bullet just to tolerate the pain. Anyway, so power, determination, he's very determined. But Brahman is also determined. So many of these qualities are shared between the two. Power, but the Brahmana doesn't like power. Brahman is also resourceful. He's expert too. Adaksham, resourcefulness. Courage in battle, Brahman is not like that, but Kshatriya is generosity. Brahman is also generous. And leadership. But, like a heroic leader, that's a Kshatriya. Are there natural qualities that work for the Kshatriyas? I'll give you I'll tell a very interesting story about someone who was a Kshatriya and he tried to act as a Brahmin. His name was Mr. Karna, and he was a Kshatriya. Anyway, he really didn't know who his mother and father were. He didn't really know that he was actually, even by a birthright, he was a Kshatriya. But in any case, he went to serve his guru. His guru's name was Parashuram. And Parashuram did not like Kshatriyas. In fact, he slaughtered them many, many times before he got angry with them because one of them, Kartavir Arjuna, and Kartavir Arjuna's sons killed his father. He, like 21 times he slaughtered, or 22 times he slaughtered them. Anyway, and there were rivers of blood from all the slaughter. So he had this thing about, he was traumatized by Kshatriyas and he really wanted to kill them. So what happened is that Karna made believe he was a Brahmin. He said, I want to become your guru. I'm Brahmin. And so one day, Karna was actually massaging his spiritual master, and his spiritual master, Parshuram, had his head on Karna's lap, and he was resting. In the meantime, some humongous creature, like a bug with many legs, started crawling on Karna's body and burrowed into his body. Yuck. And Karna didn't want to disturb his guru. And Karna just bore there the pain, determined, courageous, like that. And one of the drops of blood from his body fell on his guru's head. And the guru woke up and said, yuck, blood, what's this? And he looked and he saw the bug, or whatever the creature was. And Karna said, I tolerated this because I didn't want to disturb your rest, Guru Maharaj. And Guru Maharaj, Parashuram, got so angry, he said, this means you are cheating me. You are a Kshatriya, not a Brahmin. Therefore, I may be your guru, but I curse you. And my curse is that all the martial arts I taught you, all the weapons I taught you, all the mantras I taught you, will be forgotten by you, not now, but at the time of your death, when it's time for you to be defeated, when you're fighting with your foremost enemy. Anyway, so Karna was definitely a Kshatriya. Okay, next text. This is, of course, about the last two. Krishigodaksha vanijam vaisha karma svabhavajam paricharyatmakam karma sudrashyapi svabhavajam. And here we go. Krishi, plowing. Go, of cows. And actually that's from the same root as Krishna. Krishna also plows, but anyway, so Krish means to attract, just like a tractor. Why is a tractor called a tractor? Why? Because it's pulling something, it's attracting something, a plow. Usually you don't put the plow in front of the tractor. Although we have a tractor with a front end loader, but that's something different. But a tractor has something behind it called the plow. So, because it attracts. So Krishi means the thing that attracts, and that's a tractor. And Krish in Krishna means the person who attracts. Got it? And Na in his name means the person who gives you Ananda. Ananda means bliss, happiness, ecstasy, whatever word you want to use. So you put the two words together. It's the most attractive name of God that gives you bliss. How about that? So Krishi, plowing, go, of cows. Go also means senses, but here, and in this particular context, it means cows. Raksha, protection. Rakshamam, give me protection. Vanijam, trade. Vaisha, of a Vaisha, karma, duty. Swabhavajam, born of his own nature. Paricharya, service. Atmakam, consisting of karma, duty, Sudrasha, of the Shudra, Api also, Svabhavajam, born of his own nature. Farming, cow protection, and business are the natural work for the Vaishyas. So if you're attracted, I mean, we all like farming, basically, but that doesn't mean we're all Vaishyas. And we like cow protection, and we may like business, but if your mind is like absorbed in those things and you don't get bored doing those things, then you're Vaishya. And for the Shudras, there's labor and service to others. So if you really enjoy serving others and doing things with your body, dancing, things like that. But I said we're mostly mixed in Kali Yuga. Don't worry about it, because a devotee should never be seen as a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. A devotee should be seen as a Vaishnava. The statement is, one sees a Vaishnava in terms of these material distinctions, then one is possessed of hellish intelligence. It's compared to seeing the deity being made of stone or wood or some material substance like that. It's very, very dangerous. So, okay. Sve sve karmanyabhirata samsidim mabate naraha svakarma nirata sinim yata vindati chachranu. Sve sve, each his own, karmani, work, abhirata, following samsiddhi, perfection, labate, achieves, naraha, a man, swakarma, in his own duty, nirataha, engaged, siddhim, perfection, yata, as, vindati, attains, tat, that, shanu, listen. By following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now please hear from me how this can be done. In other words, no one is deprived of perfection. Everybody can become perfect, no matter whether you're a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, whatever type of work you're doing, if you do the work for Krishna. This is what we're going to hear. Text 46. Yata prapatir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam vakarmanatam avyarcha siddham vindati manavaha. Yata, from whom, pravati, the emanation, bhutanam, of all living entities, yena, by whom, sarvam, all, idam, this, tatam, is pervaded, swakarmana, by his own duties, tam, him, avyarcha, by worship, siddham, perfection, vindati, achieves, manavaha, man. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading, a man can achieve perfection, through performing his work. So in other words, you dedicate your work, results of your work, you do it with devotion, and you also do your sadhana. Then you can achieve perfection. Anybody in any of the varnas. As stated in the 15th chapter, all living beings are fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. Thus, the Supreme Lord is the beginning of all living entities. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. Janma Dyasha Yataha. The absolute truth is he, or from whom everything comes, is that from which everything comes. Srimad Bhagavatam is also from the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1, the same verse there. The Supreme Lord is therefore the beginning of life for every living entity, and as stated in the 7th chapter of the Gita, the Supreme Lord, by his two energies, his external energy and his internal energy, is all-pervading. Therefore, one should worship the Supreme Lord with his energies, whatever you do. Yat kuroshi yad shnashi, yad jahoshi dadashiyat, yat tapashashi kontiya, tat kurashva madarpanam. Generally, the Vaishnava devotees worship the Supreme Lord with his internal energy. Internal energy means Radha, or in the case of Lord Ramchandra, Sita, or in the case of Narayan, Lakshmi. His external energy is a perverted reflection of the internal energy. Remember that from the 15th chapter of the Gita about the banyan tree example. The external energy is a background by the Supreme Lord by the expansion of his plenary portion as Paramatma, that's the Lord in the heart. Sorry, I just hurt my Paramatma. I apologize. He's situated everywhere. He is the super soul of all demigods, all human beings, all animals, everywhere. One should therefore know that as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, one has his duty to render service unto the Supreme. Everyone should be engaged in devotional service of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness. That is recommended in this verse. Everyone should think that he's engaged in a particular type of occupation by Rishikesh, the master of the senses. And by the result, in other words, by our nature, because of our nature, we're engaged in a particular type of work. We should just think that's Krishna engaging us in that work, and we're doing it for Krishna, we're giving the results for Krishna, and we're doing it lovingly. And by the result of work in which one is engaged, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, should be worshipped. If one thinks always in this way, in full Krishna consciousness, then by the grace of the Lord, he becomes fully aware of everything. In other words, you can worship Krishna as a Brahman, giving knowledge, yashan, patam, patam, dana pratigraha, giving knowledge and learning things, teaching people how to do puja and learning how to do puja, giving charity and accepting charity. That's the perfection of life. The Lord says, and a Kshatriya, you can worship him by protecting others, hero. As a Vaishya, by protecting the cows, taking care of the cows, and doing commerce and actually giving charity and helping people in society. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Tesham aham samudarta. That's from 12th chapter, text 7. The Supreme Lord himself takes charge of delivering such a devotee. That is the highest perfection of life. That's 10-7, actually. The highest perfection of life. In whatever occupation one may be engaged, if he serves the Supreme Lord, he will achieve the highest perfection. So next verse. Shreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanustitahat. Swanustitahat. Swabhava niyatam karma kurvan napnoti kilbisham. Shreyan, better. Swadharma, one's own occupation, vigunaha, imperfectly performed, paradharmat, than another's occupation. Su, anushtitat, perfectly done, swabhava niyatam, prescribed according to one's nature. Karma, work, kurvan, performing, na, never. Apnoti, achieves, kilbisham, sinful reactions. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. In other words, why is it better to engage in one's occupation for Krishna? Because in this way your mind can be absorbed. If you're doing something that is not in accordance with your nature, you're not going to be able to control your mind. You won't be absorbed in it. The whole point is Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindya, to absorb your mind in Krishna. And to be able to absorb your mind in Krishna, you have to be able to absorb your mind in some practical activity in this world. Unless, of course, you are a Paramahamsa. Paramahamsa can actually turn off this whole material world and be absorbed in Krishna. But we may not be on that level. So therefore, we have to have some activity as described in Bhagavad Gita. Brahmarpanam brahmahavya ramagno brahmanotam brahmatena gantavyam brahma karma samadhinam. If one is actually absorbed in work for Krishna, that work becomes spiritualized, the person becomes spiritualized, the result becomes spiritualized. So we have to find some work that really absorbs our mind, not just the body. I mean, you can do many things, but you have to something that you just like absorbs you, puts you in samadhi, Brahma karma samadhi, as described in Bhagavad Gita. So do your work, understand your nature, and of course, in certain circumstances throughout the day, you can do other things just to chill out a little bit. I mean, just like today, I was doing some GBC service. It's kind of difficult. But anyway, so then just to chill out, I took a walk. And then to chill out even more, I hopped on the tractor and did some work on the property here. But that was just like, sometimes you need a little recreation just to take your mind off of what you've been concentrating on for the last 4 hours. We had like a 3 or 4 hour conference today, a Zoom conference. Let's try that sometime. For me, it's too many hours on Zoom, unless you're preaching. That's a different thing. Okay. The purport: one's occupational duty is prescribed in Bhagavad Gita, as already discussed in previous verses. The duties of a Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, or Shudra, are prescribed according to their particular mode of nature. One should not imitate another's duty. A man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Shudras should not artificially claim to be a Brahmin. Now, there's exceptions. If one's a Vaishnava, he's a Vaishnava Brahmin, even though he may be doing Shudra work. There's some adjustment when you're dealing with Vaishnavas or under the direction of a pure Vaishnava, although he may be born in a Brahmin family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahmana is certainly in the mode of goodness, but if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahmin. For a Kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies, and sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahmin. And of course, this is one of the things that Krishna is trying to teach Arjuna. Because if you try to give up your occupational duty as a Kshatriya because you don't want to fight this war, because your friends and your family are facing you, and you think, well, I'll do it by becoming a Brahmin, it's not going to work, because by your nature, as Krishna says, you're going to be forced to act anyway. And then when you're forced to act as a Kshatriya and fight, you're not going to be fighting for the right cause. That's the problem. So it's the duty of the spiritual master to ascertain the psychophysical nature of the disciple and help the disciple, facilitate the disciple in understanding what is the right work for them. And we shouldn't be so proud thinking that everybody has to be an intellectual. Like in America, for example, you have to send, just to be respected, you have to send your children, all the children have to go to the university. But because a lot of people are just plain old Shudras and not Brahmanas. Brahmana would go to the university and really be absorbed in the knowledge. Wow, isn't this cool? I get to learn. But you send a Shudra to the university, they may do well in school. But then they'll be partying, getting so many diseases, venereal diseases, and just like nowadays, they tried to open the schools up this semester that we're in right now. And they said, kids, please behave yourselves. Don't party. Don't drink. Just be nice. Thinking that the kids, they're all intellectuals and intelligent. But it's not like that. 90% of them are a bunch of not even Shudras. That would actually be praising them if, say, they're Shudras. But they're Shudra quality people. So as soon as they go, they can't keep themselves from partying, passing the virus on to each other. You can't stop it. The only way you could stop it is to screen the people who go to the university and make sure that everybody is qualified. Otherwise, people go to the university, they graduate, they do well, but what's the use? The work they do when they get out has nothing to do with what they learned about. Practically speaking, nothing. I went to the university. What am I utilizing? Of course, maybe my knowledge of mathematics or something like that. I don't think anything else I'm utilizing that I learned in the university. I could be doing this without having gone to the university. I could have, I love mathematics. I could have studied it. I mean, the type of mathematics I studied was like multidimensional calculus. Multidimensional, that means many, 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 many dimensions, n dimensions. And all sorts of mathematical theories. Yeah, I liked it. But am I really using that stuff right now? And when I want to learn something, like right now, I've given some lectures about microbiology or cellular biology, which I never learned in the university. I just pick up a book and learn it. What's the problem? So, anyway, 99% of the kids who go to the university, they should be in the university. They should just be engaged practically. You can program computers without going to a university. You can dig ditches. You can do business without going to a university. You can sell cars. You can finance cars without going to the university. I mean, maybe take a few courses in financing and accounting or something like that. Specialized type of stuff for Shudras. So you don't really need that. It's just like this whole university system is useless, and you have the wrong persons going. And even the good persons who go to the university, they get degraded by association with the lower class people. Just party time. Anyway, so, and then during the Vietnam War period, you had this draft. Now, what is a draft? A draft isn't when you get real cold and there's some wind blowing and you just start getting chilly. A draft is when, in the old days, you would register for the selective service. That means possibly being taken into the Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever, when you were 18, and you get your card. And certain people, they would pull in, regardless of what the person's nature was, they would pull into the Army or other services. They draft them. So some poor kid would find their numbers were low and they had to join the Army. Fortunately, my number was really high. I was 359. There were 365 numbers based upon what day of the year you were born, and I was 359, which means I never got taken, thank God. So all these people were taken, and they weren't soldiers by nature. And what they did when they went to war, they were in Vietnam, they were getting intoxicated, and some of them were even shooting their commanding general because they weren't qualified. They really weren't qualified to be soldiers. So that's what happens when you put the wrong person in the wrong situation, you end up with a disaster. And that's America too. You put the wrong person's press. Sorry about that one. So anyway, one should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. He was hesitating to fight the other party. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there need be no fear of degradation. In the business field also, sometimes a merchant has to tell so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, can be no profit. Sometimes a merchant says, "Oh, my dear customer, for you I'm making no profit." But one should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie if a merchant says that he's not making a profit. So, for example, many years ago, I went to buy a car, and the car dealer even showed me the invoice and showed me he was selling me the car for less than his invoice. And I understood there was some cheating going on because the car dealer gets some kickback from the factory, or was getting a kickback at that point if he sold the car. So the invoice really didn't have anything to do with how much profit he made. But the merchant should not think that because he's engaged in an occupation and pursue in which the telling of lies is compulsory, he should give up his occupation and pursue the profession of a Brahmin. That is not recommended. Whether one is a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or a Shudra, doesn't matter if he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even Brahmanas who perform different types of sacrifice, and not in this day and age, of course, sometimes must kill animals because sometimes animals are sacrificed in such ceremonies. Not in Kali Yuga. Not now. That was a previous Yuga. Similarly, if a Kshatriya is engaged in his own occupation, kills an enemy, there is no sin incurred. In the third chapter, these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every man should work for the purpose of yajna or for Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything done for personal sense gratification is the cause of bondage. The conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired, and he should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. Supreme cause of the Supreme Lord, that's what it said. All right. Sahajam karma konteya sadosham apina jajet sarvaramba hidoshena dumenagnir ivavartaha. Sahajam, born simultaneously, karma work, konteya, son of Kunti, sadosham, with fault, api, although, never, Yet, one should give up Sarva Ramba, all ventures, he certainly Doshena with fault, do may not with smoke, Agni, fire, Iva, as Avata covered. Every endeavor is covered by some fault. We're not perfect. Just as fire is covered by smoke, therefore one should not give up the work born of his nature. O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. Just like I was talking to some Vaishyas, people who did business, and for example, someone may do business driving a taxi, let's say. And I was explaining that, there's some sin connected with almost every type of business, except for the Brahmin's business. For example, when you drive in a taxi, you have to transport people who have meat or liquor or prostitutes or whatever. Although you don't want to do it, you have to do it. And so Krishna will protect you if you're a devotee. There's no way you can get out of some connection with violence in this material world. You start a car and you're killing so many living entities. Just turn the ignition on and you're killing so many living entities. You're just breathing, basically. Purport. In conditioned life, all work is contaminated by the material modes of nature. Even if one is a Brahmin, he has to perform sacrifice in which animal killing is next. Similarly, a Kshatriya, however pious may be, has to fight enemies. This is pretty repetitive. You cannot avoid it. Similarly, a merchant, however pious it may be, may sometimes hide his profit to stay in business. Chanakapanda says you should never reveal your profit. Or he may sometimes have to do business on the black market. It's interesting, previously in the Gita, Prabhupada said one should not do business on the black market. Sometimes one has to. In certain circumstances where there's no alternative. These things are necessary. One cannot avoid them. Similarly, even though a man is a Shudra serving a bad master, he has to carry out the order of the master even though it should not be done. But at a certain point, if the master asks him to do something that is against religious principles, he doesn't have to do it. But, he has to carry out if he disagrees, but if there's some adharmic thing, he doesn't have to do it. Despite these flaws, one should continue to carry out his prescribed duties, for they are born of his own nature, out of his own nature. Very nice example is given herein. Although fire is pure, still as there is smoke, yet smoke does not make the fire impure. Even though there is smoke in the fire, fire is still considered to be the purest of all elements. If one prefers to give up the work of a Kshatriya and take up the occupation of a Brahmin, he is not assured that in the occupation of a Brahmin there are no unpleasant duties. One may then conclude that in the material world, no one can be completely free from the contamination of material nature, unless they're pure devotee. This example of fire and smoke is very appropriate in this connection. When in the wintertime one takes a stone from the fire, sometimes smoke disturbs the eyes and other parts of the body, but still one must make use of the fire despite disturbing conditions. Similarly, one should not give up his natural occupation because there are some disturbing elements. Rather, one should be determined to serve the Supreme Lord by his occupational duty in Krishna consciousness. That is the perfectional point. When a particular type of occupation is performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, all the defects in that particular occupation are purified. When the results of work are purified, when connected with devotional service, one becomes perfect in seeing the self within, and that is self-realization. So it's a step there. So, next text. Whoops, we have to end now. Sorry about that. So, tomorrow we will continue with this next text, which is 49. Okay, we're getting close to the end of the chapter. And now we'll take questions. Hold on 1 second. All righty.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Oh, Abhishek, okay. So you have some questions.
I do have some questions.
Yeah.
Sure, but before asking those questions to you, Maharaj, whether I should ask here or I should ask you guys, whether I should ask these questions very confidentially.
Well, it depends on what question you want to ask. I mean, why don't you try here and see what happens?
Maharaj, I was hearing the statement of Srila Prabhupada when he mentioned that one should do in this world whether everything for the sacrifice or for the yajna. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, can you just explain me that point very much?
Well, yagya in Kali Yuga is what? Does anyone know? Sankirtan.
Second.
Uh, Kali Kalera Dhamma Krishna Nama Sankirtan Krishna Shakti Vinana Hate Hari Pravartana.
Sure.
So one should do everything for Krishna to help propagate Krishna's names. That's the best yagya. We're not talking about the swaha business. Doing a generally when you hear the word yagya, you think of the fire, people throwing things in the fire, swaha, om, savitra, swaha, uh, om shanti, swaha, shanti, shanti, swaha, om. Anyway, that's not what is meant. Because the yagya means sacrifice. It doesn't necessarily mean just the fire type of sacrifice. So one should do everything to praise Krishna. Ultimately, that's the point. And Kali Yuga, it means basically the chanting of the Lord's holy names and propagating the chanting of the Lord's holy names. Okay?
Okay. Okay.
All right. That wasn't a confidential question, so that's pretty good.
I have a question.
Yeah, Tulsi, what's your question?
Okay, so you were speaking about how we need to engage our mind, and that kind of shows our nature or whatever.
Yeah,
And then you also spoke about also, the body. But so how about the heart?
the heart. The heart. That's what sadhana is for. Because how are you going to engage the heart unless you know who to focus the heart on,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, you
Yes,
can
sir.
be doing work for Krishna, but not engaging your heart. That's karma yoga, in fact. So the way we transform the karma yoga into bhakti yoga and continue to working for Krishna is that we do our sadhana. We hear and chant about Krishna, and then Vidyantak sto yabadrani. We mentioned that verse this morning. Vidunoti sarichatam. Krishna in our heart cleanses it. And then we develop rati, a taste for hearing about Krishna. We fall in love with Krishna. Hmm. Just like, what is that story? Oh, Nal and Damayanti. There was I think it was some sort of like a bird, yeah, or something like that, that carried information about Nal to Damayanti, if I remember correctly, some sort of swan or something. Yeah, swan. And so she heard about Nal. So it's an interesting love story in the Vedic literatures. And it's one that we often tell the story of. I'm not going to tell the whole story about love because I'm a sannyasi, shouldn't tell these stories. So anyway, she by hearing and also Rukmini, she heard about Krishna, right? And she fell in love with Krishna. She decided, I ain't gonna marry this Shishupal creep. I'm gonna marry Krishna. And she sent a message to Krishna. So when you hear about someone, I just like even right now, people fall in love just because they are communicating by email, or of course even better by let's say video calls. But anyway, they may not meet each other. So we just like yeah, actually, this is a good example. Like when people make video calls, people on the other side of the planet can fall in love with each other when they finally meet. They're still in love, hopefully. So we do that with Krishna. We hear about Krishna and we see Krishna on. We get a video call from Krishna because Krishna's on the altar. We see Krishna and we hear about Krishna. We fall in love with Krishna and we give our heart to Krishna. I mean, it's one thing to serve God because that's what you're supposed to do. That's just like dry duty. It's another thing to serve God because you love Him. So giving the heart means love. Shraddha, to give the heart. It's not simply to believe. You believe and you'll be saved. I believe in the Lord and I can be sinful. No, you have to give your heart to Krishna. You understand? So if you don't hear regularly about Krishna, you won't give your heart to him. Uh, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And that means hearing Bhagavad on a regular basis. Because hearing Bhagavad means to hear about Krishna. We talked about this morning, which you were not there for. Anyway, maybe you heard it online. So we talked about this morning, that one hears about Krishna. It accomplishes many things by hearing about Krishna. Krishna in the heart cleanses the dirt. Then we hear about Krishna, we hear about his qualities, we become attracted. And then we hear about Krishna, and then we remember who we are in relationship to Krishna. We hear about Krishna, not only Krishna, we've been reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam about the seasons in Vrindavan, especially the rainy season in Vrindavan. And just by hearing about all the beautiful clouds and trees and birds and waterfalls that are all conscious, then your mind starts to be attracted to the spiritual nature of Krishna. And then you fall in love with Krishna, and you fall in love with Vrindavan. Falling in love with Vrindavan is the same thing as falling in love with Krishna. Falling in love with the aspects of the spiritual realm is the same as falling in love with Krishna. Like if you become attracted to the waterfalls in Vrindavan. I remember one year it was really funny. This is a joke. It's not a joke, I actually did it. One year I took a picture I was in the rainy season. I was at Govardhan. And I took a picture of Govardhan, a beautiful picture of Govardhan. I took a picture of a waterfall, and I used trick photography to put them together. And I put it on the internet, and I said that this is one of the many wonderful waterfalls around Govardhan. And everybody was sending me messages. Where's this waterfall? We haven't seen this beautiful waterfall coming out of Govardhan. And eventually, I think I revealed what I had done. So sometimes we have to be tricky to attract people to Krishna. So in any case, yeah, so we have to hear about Krishna, hear about his holy dham, hear about his devotees. We hear about Prabhupada, we give our heart to Prabhupada by hearing about Prabhupada. What does it say? Mama virya samvidaha, bhavanti vritkarna rasayana. Lord Kapila says if we hear about Krishna's heroic activities, Satam prasangam mama virya samvado, bhavanti ritkarna rasayana katata joshana dashu apavarga vartmani shradha ratira bhakti nukrameshati. Then what happens is the heart, we become so cleansed when we develop faith, shradha ratira, a taste, love. All these follow from one after the other if one hears about Krishna. The solution is hearing. If people don't hear, they will not be able to be blissful. Their life will be dry if you don't hear regularly. I mean, it's so wonderful to hear Bhagavatam. I mean, this morning I gave Bhagavatam. I'm not saying that I was wonderful, but it was just nice thinking about Vrindavan and all these different descriptions that are there. Just wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. So you disappeared. So I guess you went back to sleep. So any other questions?
Hare Krishna, Madhav Das.
Madhva, you have a question?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. So
Hare Krishna.
the verse number 40, it said actually that even in a higher planetary system is even not free of modes of material nature. That includes even mode of ignorance. So, and demigods, so do also demigod, I know higher planetary systems is still material, but demigods there also exhibit ignorance.
Well, you know the example of Indra and
Yeah.
Ahalya?
Yeah.
You know that? That's right.
So
Indra's like the chief administrative demigod, and one day he sees this Ahalya married to Gautama Rishi, and in order to have a relationship with her, he takes on the guise of Gautama Rishi.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
shoo-wee. And then you have other stories of demigods stealing each other's wives. Soma stole the wife of Brahaspati. I mean, come on. Soma, the moon. You got Brahaspati, the spiritual master's wife. the guy steals. I mean, if that's not ignorance, I don't know what is. So yes, generally they're in the mode of goodness, but they're not free from the modes of nature. It can affect them. Like Bhagavad Gita says, sometimes the mode of goodness is prominent, defeating ignorance and passion, and sometimes ignorance is prominent, defeating goodness and passion, etc., like that. So yes, there's no place that's free of these things.
So how they got kind of promoted and got such a responsibility when they
Good
had
karma.
that quality, how they got to higher planetary system?
Well, they had a lot of good karma. A lot of good karma, you know. And when the good karma runs out, shune punye marcha lokam vishanti. But they had a lot of good karma. They did a lot of things, but it gets attractive. When you're put in a situation with a lot of power and a lot of facility for enjoyment, it really is attractive. I mean, you see, even in this world, when you put someone in a situation where whether the power corrupts or dhanam, janam, sundarim, they're put in a situation where there's material allurement, even if they had good intentions. The road to hell, I guess, is paved with good intentions. Then they can succumb to that. It's extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous when one is put in a situation like that. So don't do it. Oh no, you wouldn't. You're a great devotee. I mean, I wouldn't want to go to the heavenly planets because it's hard to convince them that the material world is suffering. And going to hell is actually a good idea because the preaching is fantastic there. It's like,
So if
yeah,
if one does not succeed, when one try, we best to go to Goloka Vrindavan, but if one doesn't become pure, gets the
yeah.
next life, where that person will go? Still take birth on Earth
Krishna,
planet?
Krishna answers that question in the Gita. He says if you're very advanced, then you take birth in a Vaishnava family, and such a birth is very rare. And if you're a little advanced, less than very advanced, then you actually go to the heavenly planets, enjoy, go to Hawaii for a while, and you enjoy. You go to Hawaii, it's funny, and enjoy for a while, and then after you've enjoyed, then you come back to the Earth planet and you take birth in a rich family. And then you get a chance to be Krishna conscious. And, being born in a rich family is a good idea in the sense that you got time on your hands. You don't have to worry about eating or material facilities. Many of us who joined the Krishna consciousness, we were born in rather rich families. I mean, I never had to worry about anything my whole life as far as material facility until I joined the Krishna conscious movement. And it was a different subject matter, but anyway. Then I had to worry about, who stole my tape recorder or whatever. But before I joined the movement, life was easy. So
Thank you.
yeah, so there's an advantage. So yeah, aswapamapya shuddharma shutrayate matobaya. And in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution. Okay, I think we have to. I know Sumukh has a question. I'm looking at the raised hands here. Sumukh has a question, but too late. Too late, too late, too late. So let's end here, and we'll see everybody tomorrow, same time, same station. We'll continue with the Bhagavad Gita, and we are going to finish really quickly. And then we'll go on to Nectar of Devotion. Really looking forward to going through the Nectar of Devotion the same way we've gone through the Bhagavad Gita. We're up to about 115, not just about, but 115 classes so far in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's pretty nice, isn't it? So many classes. And all these classes are on my YouTube channel, Dear Krishna Goswami, and you're invited to listen to these classes at any time. Okay. Thank you very much. All glory is to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.